Now after the dough has chilled, this has chilled overnight, but you could wait about 30 minutes until it's firm. It's a bit firm. You want to pull out your dough, your Pate Sucree, and we're going to roll it out. Before I roll it out, I'm going to have a little tart shell. This is the only one I have. It's nice to get the false bottom ones where the bottom is removable. I don't have that. I got this from a cheapo Japanese store for $1.50. Just for this demo purpose, because I couldn't go back to the school to get my stuff. But I'm just going to ensure that it won't stick by spraying it and putting a little piece of parchment paper on the bottom. Okay, now we get my dough, my rolling pin out. You're gonna flour the bench pretty heavily, pretty well. Especially with pastry, you're okay to flour the dough so it doesn't stick. Let me top it off. Okay. It's a little cold because I just pulled it out, so I'm just going to kind of work it slowly. We're going to blind bake this, meaning we're going to line the tart shell, and we're going to, oh, it's breaking. We're going to bake it in the oven until it's fully cooked. And then we're going to fill it with our fillings and pastry cream. So that we're making a fruit tart today. Okay, so it's cracking a little bit. So it's just because it's a little too cold. What's good thing about this dough, unlike pie dough, if there's a hole, you could just kind of squish it back together. You just wait a little bit. It's a little bit too warm. I pulled this out from the refrigerator about 10 minutes ago, but I probably needed a little bit more time. Okay, I'm just going to roll it to 1/4 of an inch kind of thickness. You don't want it too thick and you don't want it too thin. I find for a tart shell, the bottom should be kind of thinner, but the edges should be a little bit thicker just so they don't crack. Let's see. It's getting there. You always want to make sure you flour it. Flour the bottom especially, because if it sticks, then that's a sad day. It can tear. Oh, it's getting there. Let me go get my small ones also. Okay, it's almost a good thickness. The edges are a little thick, but I'm just gonna cut them anyway. I think this is pretty good. So my tart shell is ready. You could roll this up. I'm gonna place your tart shell like this, and we're going to lay it right on top. So when you gotta force it down, lift it up, and push, lightly push into the corners. Okay, you want to push it down. Okay, and you want to get into the corners. A trick is if you get a piece of dough, you could push that into the corners without getting your fingernail kind of in it or your fingerprints. So you get a piece of dough, kind of use it to push it in, but I think I'm okay. Okay, so once you have this, just make sure you push some extra dough down to make your crust a little thicker. Okay, I want it thick enough because if it's too thin, sometimes it falls. Okay, so from here, just going to cut it off with my rolling pin. Okay, remove this excess. Okay, just kind of, it looks good. Okay, so from here, I'm going to chill this in the refrigerator. I'm gonna And then I'm gonna prick it. I'm gonna let this firm up in the fridge because we just developed the gluten. Let it rest for at least 30 minutes before we bake it. It will reduce the shrinking from the tart dough. Okay, I'm gonna put this in the fridge. Okay. In the meantime, I have some little tart shells. If you want to do a mini tart shell, there's different ways you could do this. You could re-roll this. I'm not gonna try to overwork it. There's some flour in it, so it might get a little tough. So it's sticking a little bit. Okay. One thing you could do is line these up. Okay. Maybe let me do like 4. And you could take this, roll it up, line them up this way, and then cut it. I don't like that. Sometimes it's not the right size. You could also get a cutter and cut out the shapes. Something a little bit bigger than the diameter. Oh, it's a little too. I'm just going to eyeball it because it's not big enough. Okay, you're gonna take this, same thing, you wanna push it down. Push it down. Make sure you get that the corner. Okay. Okay, same thing. You could use your rolling pin. Sometimes you could use your thumb and just cut the edge off. Okay. Line the tart shell. Okay, just make sure it's not too thick. Okay. The bottom should be a little bit thinner. Do one more. Okay, and then I use my thumb to cut off the edge. Or you could use the back of a knife. Or you could use a rolling pin as well. Okay, so those are your baby tarts. I'm going to let that hang out in the fridge the same time, 30-minute rest, and then we'll come back. So these lined pans with the dough have been chilling in the fridge for about 30 minutes. We're going to, this is a docker. Oh, I didn't know it would work. What you want to do is poke some holes on the bottom. It doesn't get to the side. So if you want to get a knife or a fork, you want to prick the bottom of this dough so it doesn't bubble up or blister up. You want to make sure it doesn't bubble up and everything. So you want to just prick the bottom really well. Go all the way through. Don't be shy. The little ones as well. Okay. You could do this with a fork also. I like the fork too, because you could get 4 dots in one, 4 holes in one. Okay. So once you have it nice and docked, it's better when it's cold. I'm going to line the bottom of this with a piece of parchment paper. And then you're going to put on the bottom beans or pie weights. I don't have either. I have this like multi-grain rice mix. You could also use rice. What happens is this adds weight and it's a heat conductor, so it could cook the bottom of those as well. So I'm going to put those on a sheet pan. Actually, in my oven, I have a sheet pan heating because I want to cook the bottom of this quick, and my oven's pretty bad. So for the little ones, I like to use a little bit of foil, and it's just because it's easier to mold it in the small ones. You could also put foil in here if you want. Can this fit? Let's try to be resourceful. There you go. And then these two, you want to put some pie weights down. Beans, make sure if you use beans or rice, you don't want to eat them after. They will forever be your blind baking beans and such, just for pie. So I'm going to stick these in the oven and then bake them for about 10 minutes. And then I'm going to remove this just so the crust sets. I'm going to remove the beans and then bake them again for 10 minutes until it's light brown. When I remove the first beans, I'll egg wash the bottom just so when I bake it again, it'll seal it. So it'll have a protective layer from my filling. All right, so I'll be back. So these were cooking in my oven for about 10-15 minutes. So I'm gonna remove the beans. These are almost done, these little guys, because they're smaller, they cook a little faster. So I'm gonna remove my dry beans. These, ooh, oh no. I guess use a whole piece of foil, guys. Though I was trying to cheat my way. Okay, and then these. Okay, you want to just remove that so the bottom will cook. These little ones, I'm gonna take a little bit of egg wash. Well, they're almost done. I'm gonna take a little egg wash, and then egg wash the bottom. Also, too, if you don't want to egg wash the bottom of these, they'll just continue cooking. It'll create a seal. If you don't want to egg wash the bottom, I'll do it with the big one. I'm going to I'll show you what I'm going to do after, but I'm going to stick this right in. The big one needs to cook a lot more until it's nice and brown. So I took these little guys out when they were finished. While they were still hot, I'm going to show you. Even though I egg washed them, if you don't want to egg wash them, I like to put a little bit of chocolate on the bottom right when I take them out of the oven, and then they'll just cool. I mean, they'll just melt as it cools. So I'm gonna just, ideally you would do this with a brush or a little spatula, but I just put a little chocolate chip on the bottom. Okay, and then the residual heat will melt the chocolate, and as it cools, it'll harden. So right now I'm making like its own little chocolate barrier when I add a filling to this. It's really, really hot. So that's one thing you can do while it's warm. Well, it's still super hot. So I'm gonna remove them just so they cool on this wire rack. Ooh, okay. And then we're just gonna wait for that big one. Okay. So this crust is almost done. I'm going to just brush this with egg wash. Or you could even do egg white is a good thing. It's a little piece of, what is that? I think it's a bean. Yeah, it's a bean. Be careful with your blind baking stuff. Okay, so I'm gonna stick that back in the oven until it's golden brown and we're ready to go. So this is the final product after blind baking your tart shells. If you could see, I should have pushed it a little bit farther into this, into the mold a little bit, but that is ready to be filled. You can fill it with pastry cream and then top it with fruit. You could do whatever you want with basically any of these. Fill this with a chocolate ganache, make a chocolate tart. It's all up to you, okay? Have fun.